I learned these business lessons the expensive way, through thousands of dollars and years of stress. Today, I'm sharing the business advice that I wish somebody would have taught me when I first started my business. This video isn't about building better decks, it's about building a better business. Over the last 35 years of being in business, I started my business when I was 21 years old with no money, a very small amount of tools, and a little bit of experience. And I really wish that somebody could have nurtured or mentored me along the way. It would have probably sped me up and made me more successful at a younger age. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but I have some tips and tricks for you that maybe will help you in the future. Probably the first thing that I would have done if I knew then what I know now is I would have enrolled in the local community college into some form of a business class. How to run a business. It would give you the basics that would teach you what you need to know and what you need to do to basically run any type of business that you're gonna have over the years. If I would have known that, I would have done a few of these other tips that I'm gonna share with you much sooner in my career. It would have cost me more money, but it would have saved me so much effort and energy, and potentially getting into having some issues with the state or possibly the government in the future for as far as taxes, payroll, and that kind of thing. So business class, number one. If you have the energy, time, if you don't have the money and somebody wants to give you a gift, say, hey, I would really love to take a business class at my local community college just to learn a little bit more about what I'm doing behind the scenes. The stuff we don't really see on camera too often, right? The next thing I would consider doing, probably to go along with that business class, is I would hire an accountant. Possibly a CPA. CPAs get a little more expensive, but maybe your accountant could help you navigate taxes, payroll, if you have employees and that kind of thing, or if you're just doing it all yourself, you still have to file at least quarterly. I have to file monthly now because our revenue has gone up to a certain point. I used to file quarterly, and guess what? Every quarter, my filings would be late because I was doing it all by myself. That didn't work out too well. I did that for about the first 10 years of my business until I got to the point where I was having late fees. The state was calling me, representatives of the Department of Revenue were calling me every month, asking me where my returns were. And I'm saying, hey, it's late, sorry. And that doesn't look too good. They're gonna keep clamping down on you more. And then once I got somebody to help me I just paid them to file all that stuff. Everything was on time, everything was accurate, everything was on point. And it's a little bit scary. Most of the times when you hire an accountant, you give them access to your bank account because they have to go through every charge on your business account and see what that charge is for, categorize it, put it in a certain column in their spreadsheet so they know, hey, how much did you spend on cellular? How much did you spend at Home Depot on tools? How much did you spend on materials? And so on and so forth. And then they compile all that stuff, and then your revenue for like your business and all that, taxes, man, I don't deal with any of that stuff. I don't understand it because I pay somebody else to deal with it. I do the things I want to do in my business to be successful, and then I hire out the other things that I don't want to do to stay even more successful than I was. If you're young and just starting your business or wanting to start a business, I would consider working for somebody else for a year or two to get all the knowledge you can about all the small things, all the stuff, all the way from the footings, the finished trim, railing, and everything else. Learn as much as you can, be a sponge, write it down, create a notebook, write down what you did that day or that week. Remember, hey, this certain footing layout, I use this type of footing, we poured this much concrete, we use this kind of screw pile. Learn as much as you can about all the different opportunities that you can use for different types of projects. Learn how, from the beginning of planning, sales, go out on a sales call. You know what? If I was young and I was working for somebody else, I would ask, hey, can I go out on a couple estimates with your salesman or you so I can learn a little bit more about how the deck is sold, how I can get more projects and sell them? Maybe I want to get into sales. You know, just learn as much as you can about that particular topic, all the different components of a company besides building the deck. It will definitely help you in the future. For what we do as far as deck building, you can build decks on your own and be a solo builder, but it gets difficult. It takes more energy. As you get older, that's going to become more of a challenge. So employees usually are a must. I have 2 employees plus me, so we run a 3-man team year round where I live. even though sometimes it gets a little cold and especially it gets wet here. But having a couple guys, at least one, and then possibly two when you can afford it, is a great way to lighten your load and get more work done and be able to be more efficient on the job site. I've seen deck teams that are 6, 7 deep. I'm always impressed by that as long as it's efficient. But I also see a lot of standing around, so I'm sure there's some time burnt when you have that many employees, because some are waiting for the restroom, some are waiting to use a chop saw, that kind of thing. So you just got to figure out what's efficient for you. I think a 3 or 4 man team is a really great medium-sized deck crew that can knock it out. Having a good web page is crucial. Making sure that it indexes properly, that you have a good Google business page. Everything digital. Social media is so important nowadays. It's like free advertising for you, but you gotta be consistent on it. You gotta continually keep feeding the beast. It's not something that you can just put out 10 posts one month and say, okay, I'm done with social media, it's just gonna do fine now. No, it doesn't work that way. You gotta do it daily, or at least 3 or 4 times a week to keep your audience engaged, to keep the followers growing, and just to keep everything updated in general. You can also push some of your content straight back to your web page from your social media, which is kind of cool. Just make sure all those links are working, double check it, check on it every once in a while. Have a good webmaster. If you're not internet savvy, hire somebody to help you with that stuff. I do. I hire a guy to help me once in a while because I can't always nail it on every single item. There's so much to do. Maybe considering a marketing company or something like that as well. But having a good web page and having a good social media presence is crucial. All right, next tip. If you're gonna be a contractor, usually you have to be licensed, bonded, and insured, which means not only do you need the local business license of wherever you're working, you need a contractor's license from the state that you're working in. You're also going to need a bond. That's a security bond to make sure that if you screw up, that the client has something to go for, that it represents you as a company. So you have to do good quality work. I don't like it when people experiment on other people's homes to learn. You should already have that information and know what's going on. If you're trying something risky, you need to let the client know, I'm not sure if this is gonna work or not. I think it's gonna work, but it may not work, because shoddy workmanship is why we are bonded and insured. So we have insurance for contractors. If we make a big mistake and we burn a house down or something collapses onto something, that's what the insurance is for. And the state that you're working in wants to make sure you're licensed, you're bonded, and you're insured. So those 3 things you have to line up and make sure that you are qualified to be registered with the state as a licensed contractor. That is why licensed contractors cost more than the fly-by-night framers that can come in and do something where they aren't licensed and bonded. They're not up to par with the state of Washington. And if something happens and you give them a down payment and they leave town, you're screwed. Another thing that I wish I would have known about earlier in my career was how to pull a permit. Building permits are essential in a lot of the builds that we do. There's certain rules and regulations. If you're over a certain height, you're gonna have to obtain a building permit. The drawings, construction drawings, overhead view, plan view, side view, front view, plot plan, all that stuff. One of the hardest things that I do when I'm pulling a permit is figuring out the plot plan. Nowadays, for 150 bucks, you can go online to mysiteplan.com and use those guys to figure out, hey, this is the address. They'll put the house on the lot with dimensions and the size of the lot. It's really worth it, because it took me an hour and a half the other day to get a site plan done. And unfortunately, that could have been alleviated by going to mysiteplan.com. I just didn't have the time on that particular one, but the last couple jobs I've done, I've used it and it works really good. So a good site plan, how to pull a permit, and while we're on the topic, get yourself a good structural engineer. Structural engineers are gonna help you figure out the sizing of the members, how deep the hole has to be, how big the hole has to be for your concrete, the size of the posts, beams, and joists. How far apart can you span? How far can you span the joist to go to the beam? All that stuff is math. I don't know how to do that kind of math, so I pay a guy that tells me if the maths or not, okay? What happens is I do the construction drawings, I send them to my engineer, he marks them up, sends them back, I address all of his concerns, I send it back to him, he stamps it, signs it, I take that packet and send it with the application for the building permit. So it's a nice relationship. If you have a good relationship with a good structural engineer, you're ahead of the game. Another thing, as I started in my career in the first 5 years, I started bidding on blueprinted jobs. Jobs where like a contractor say, hey, give me a price for this deck. Here's a set of blueprints. I didn't know how to read the blueprint. I didn't understand the blueprint. So it took hours of studying that blueprint and figuring out how to read it. Sometimes it's not really that difficult. Some architects make it really easy to read a set of blueprints, others not so much. It depends if it's a quickie sketch or if it's super detailed. I don't bid on a lot of commercial projects. Those sets of blueprints are quite extensive, but on a home remodel or a new construction home, sometimes the blueprints aren't so bad, but being able to read them and understand them is important, so get educated on how to do that. And my last piece of advice, guys, is learn how to price the deck accordingly for your market, for yourself, and just for your general future in deck building. You're gonna have to know your pricing. My pricing is high. I check it with some of my competitors. Sometimes a client will share with me a competitor's price. So just know, if you don't have your pricing down, it can cost you dearly. A lot of guys will just say, I'll just do this deck for $120 a square foot, and that includes everything. I price every item out individually. I call it itemized. I itemize my deck numbers. So there's deck, fascia, surface borders, skirting, steps, railing, lighting, so on and so forth, patio cover. Everything has an item and an item price. That way I know I'm not missing out on any profit. If you just lump everything into one sum, yeah, you're gonna make money, but how much money did you make? There's different ways to do it. For me, I like to be tactical about my price, and I like to justify every item on that list to the client so they know where their money's going. All right, guys, so there's some items that I wish I knew then that I know now. If you like this video, please click that subscribe button, hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to order a t-shirt below in the link, and check out our new podcast. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.